probably worth clarifying, there's no like distinctly necessary correct answer in this, though there is sort of a reasoning behind why it might be sort of effective to have a certain length of video. But I think it all depends on sort of context as well. There is perhaps room and context for different size screencasts depending on what you're doing and how engaging you are being, and sort of what other little interactions you're doing perhaps as well.
I think Sarah makes a good point, Dan. So Sarah says it depends on the information, but 45 minutes is way too long to hold the viewer's attention, and 5 minutes seems too short to go into any depth at all. I guess when we're talking about 45 minutes, I think that's becoming more kind of lecture capture rather than a screencast.
Yeah, I think it's a slightly different type of thing, and that's more something perhaps, as you say, if you are capturing like a whole lecture you would be doing in a class, that's when you might have a sort of quite longish video to sort of recap, for people to recap and review the actual lecture that they attended. But when we're doing sort of perhaps this more sort of online, asynchronous or not live kind of sessions, then people are sort of mentioning that having longer videos definitely is there's a lot of cognitive load going on there, and it may be difficult to keep students engaged throughout the entire video.
Yeah.
And a lot of people actually bring out these nice little this term sort of chunking your videos or chunking your lecture content into smaller videos, and this is really nice sort of practice. So if you can break down sort of what was previously like a big 1 or 2 hour session into smaller, between 5, 10, 15 minutes, sort of that sort of length, smaller the better, very sort of focused on a particular section of the topic you're speaking about, then those are definitely, I think, easier for students cognitively to get engaged with, and seems like a smaller time investment for them than if they're being faced with a really long screencast. And even if you have a small series perhaps of shorter videos on a sort of greater topic, then they can perhaps feel a bit more motivated to move from one to the other if they're sort of very bite-sized sort of chunks.
Yeah, Alison makes a good point here. I think she's agreeing with you there, Dan. Alison says 5 minutes per concept to maintain concentration.
Yeah.
I think it's good, but I think maybe we need a balance as well, because if we have lots and lots of 5 minute chunked videos, that's quite a long quite a long playlist for students to get through. So maybe we want to think about supplementing some of that video content with a bit of reading, or some other formats. It's about getting a balance, really, I guess.
Yeah, and it does vary, I think, as well. It does vary depending on what you're talking about and what sort of other activities you've got. Okay, so moving on in the interest of time, I know there's probably still a lot of things people would like to talk about in the chat, and please feel free to continue putting your thoughts down in there as we go through. I'm just going to end this poll and move on. So I'm just going to talk over briefly why we would sort of advocate for perhaps just shorter videos. They're definitely sort of think about the context of your own situation about what would be appropriate or not. But it comes down to sort of the shorter videos have been found sort of in sort of the wider context of the industry to hold engagement a little bit better, and to sort of motivate students from moving from one to the other, and prevents things like students having information overload from having a lot of their learning coming through in just one long video, and being able to engage it at their own kind of pace, and when they feel sort of ready to absorb new information. And also, it can be a fairly passive learning experience with longer videos, when you find like if someone isn't sort of concentrating beyond sort of 10 or 15 minutes of a video, they might start doing other things around sort of while the video is playing, whether they're sort of browsing on the internet, looking at their phone, doing something else. They might inadvertently kind of switch off a little bit on these longer videos, and actually maybe they're not getting the full benefit of that video in their learning experience, and becomes fairly passive. So having shorter chunk videos focused on topics that they can move from one to the other, sort of supplemented with bits of reading, and also perhaps other little activities, maybe on Blackboard or synchronous opportunities like we're doing here in Blackboard Collaborate or on Teams to kind of discuss topics that they perhaps saw in the videos, and kind of having a bit more like that sort of flipped learning approach might work quite well in some cases.